WWI Live. Guys, this is as live as we can get. We are out on the road at Nittany Cards Plus in State College. Want to thank you to them for having us here today, and we've got a whole lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to preview the blue-white game. Of course, with me today, Sean Fitz, publisher of Blue White Illustrated and senior insider and reporter and editor and all-around great guy. That is Nate Bauer.
Are you sure? So many titles. We didn't agree to all those.
Well, I was vamping because my brain was on some runtime. We're a little bit late today because 2 or 3 things happened simultaneously as I'm getting ready for the show today. So we're here just a little bit after 2 o'clock because one of the things we have to talk about, going to get right into it, guys. We have some breaking news. Play the graphics so we can get going. Nate Bauer.
It's important when the graphic goes up.
Yeah, I didn't let the whole thing play because it's 10 seconds and we're already a minute and 18 seconds into the show. We haven't talked about the fact that it is now officially out there in the public. KeAndre Lambert-Smith has not been with the Penn State football team this week heading into the blue-white game. So, guys, we've been talking about this over at the Blue White Illustrated message board for about a week. Nate, you and I were talking about this. This week.
4 days.
4 days. It's a work week.
3 days and 3 shows in 3 days. That'll get to you.
Yeah. My brain has been on a spin cycle this week with all the things we've been doing. But Nate, this is big news for Penn State. So let's talk about the situation with KeAndre and how this has all evolved and what you know through your reporting of this particular situation.
Yeah, I think important to note, not in the transfer portal as of yet, as far as we know, right? Has not officially made that step, but some background information. I think maybe Monday I was, kind of alerted to his locker looking a little light. All the stuff was gone. And so that was, as these things go in the reporting world, maybe a little bit of a smoke signal,
right?
Indicating that something was amiss with KeAndre Lambert-Smith. So
that means on Tuesday, when we were at open practice, Fitz, we were there, and KeAndre was not. So you put the pieces together, and now we're here at this situation. I guess what's your view of this late-breaking development? The transfer portal opens next week, I believe on the 15th?
Yeah, the transfer portal opens on the 16th, so it'll be an opportunity for non-graduate transfers. Actually, everybody can go in basically at that point. From my understanding, he's supposed to finish up this spring. So is that a situation where he goes in right away? I don't know. But this has been something that's been going that direction. KeAndre, we have to add that caveat all the time. Amazing physical talent, and sometimes disappears. And this week, physically, he disappeared.
Yeah, he's, I think the most fair way to describe him. But again, I don't know KeAndre personally. We right? It's not, you're not talking about having a relationship there, but mercurial, I believe, is the apt description of him on and off the field. Right. He's just a guy who has a little bit of a flair for the dramatic, and there was some question, I would say, coming out of last season, right? So coming off of the Peach Bowl, but also really even going into the Peach Bowl, right? The tail end of the season, how his production was waning a little bit, becoming less of a factor. It was a question as to whether or not he would, the important caveat here is he's returning for a 5th season. This is a bonus year for him. So he didn't have to come back in the first place. But, things kind of dragged out a little bit. You get into, I want to call it mid-January, maybe, when he made an announcement with Happy Valley United that he was coming back. But again, that's kind of part of the deal with this is you have players making announcements in January that don't necessarily have to hold until the season. 9 months is a long time. There's another transfer window in there. And, I think it is, I feel comfortable saying, something that KeAndre is exploring deeply at this point.
It's interesting because some of the things we've been asked, on the Blue White Illustrated message board is this Andy Kotelnicki? He's the new variable, right? Of he's the offensive coordinator. They're in spring football now, and this is all happening now. From what I understand, football's not the problem. This is actually a great situation. They have things have been going well for KeAndre during spring practice, but this is more on the relationship side. This is more on how long you've been at Penn State, and you mentioned mercurial, and sometimes that's tough to deal with, like that from both sides. And you feel like you can do more. You feel like you are the guy, and then maybe it doesn't feel like that's reciprocated. And now heading into the final week of spring practice, it feels like these are the things that are either being worked out or have been decided.
Yeah, I do think some important context to this is KeAndre wanted more respect last year, right? Like,
yes.
And again, I mean, just whether it's for the show or elsewhere, he kind of clapped back at me at one point over some things that we talked about here on the show. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm as mild-mannered as they come. I try to be nice
yes.
And complimentary to everybody, but it wasn't a personal thing with KeAndre, and we talked about it. It is simply a matter of he feels a certain level of disrespect, right? I don't know exactly how to frame it, but
the chip on the shoulder has always been there.
Yeah,
always been there.
100%. So
and
he's
that's
got,
fine. You need that as a receiver. It just comes across differently in different ways.
Yes, and so it's been a thing, really, if we're being honest, throughout his career at Penn State, where it's been a constant game of figuring out when that switch is going to happen, when he has confidence in himself and doesn't necessarily see it as the world disrespecting him.
Yeah, right? It's not us against them. Sometimes it feels like it's the world against KeAndre from that particular conversation, especially when now you're folding in NIL and prestige and some of those personality things of, am I being treated like the leader in the room? How can I be the leader in the room if I don't, that perceived feeling isn't there?
This is also program wide, right? Like it's not limited to KeAndre. This was one of the byproducts and things that we understood were going to happen. The unintended consequences, as James Franklin likes to say sometimes, the unintended consequences of NIL is you've got a locker room culture where you are trying so hard to control it and to make sure that everybody feels like things are an even playing field. And on the back side of it, sometimes there are needs that you need to go out there and get in the transfer portal, or elsewise, right? Where people are going to have those conversations in the locker room about, hey, what are you getting? Right? What do I get?
Right.
Where does this pecking order stand? And again, nobody anywhere feels like they get enough.
Yeah,
like that's part of the thing is nobody ever feels like they're valued the way that they should be.
And they went out this spring, they got this winter, and they got Julian Fleming, who may not, I don't think he's like the talented guy that's going to overtake KeAndre on the football field, but people are going to ask every question about Julian Fleming because he's from right up the road, because he went to Ohio State, all these different things of this homecoming story. So that's been sort of the media storm this spring has been, hey, how is Julian Fleming going to change things? Maybe not necessarily on the field, but in the locker room, he's now the guy who hasn't been here for the past 5 years like KeAndre Lambert-Smith.
Yep.
He's the guy that you're turning to as an example as a leader. And I think there's levels there that you can certainly read into.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's certainly worth bringing up because Fleming has been a brand in this state for a long, long time, and people attach themselves to this state or to those type of brands from this state, and it's probably something he wasn't crazy about hearing.
And again, when James Franklin has been asked about the receivers, it's not as though the receivers as a whole that anyone felt like this was a resolved issue, right?
Yeah.
Right. The receivers they have had that chip, collectively have had a chip on their shoulder. But James Franklin, when asked about the receivers as a whole, and then when asked about KeAndre specifically, deserved or not, right? I don't know how else to put it, but James Franklin is typically pretty honest about these things, and he does not force himself into blowing smoke when it's not deserved. And so this spring, the things that James Franklin has said about the receivers room and about KeAndre specifically are, some flashes, getting better.
Well, you had the great line for it, like he's flashing more consistently, which is in itself kind of an oxymoronic statement. But like, how many times do you flash making big plays?
Well, you look back at last spring and last summer, and every question that you asked about the receivers was followed by KeAndre and Trey, and everyone else.
Yep.
This spring, it's been everyone basically, and not necessarily in like everyone's standing out, but like everyone's lumped together, waiting for somebody to jump ahead, waiting for somebody to come out and be the alpha, if you will.
Yep.
And if you read those, if you take James Franklin at his word, and as you said, he's pretty upfront with these things, there hasn't been a ton of separation, and separation's been an issue for that room for
on and off the field.
Figuratively.
Yes.
Anyway.
So that's the latest of what we have, what we've been talking about over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great time to remind you, whether you're here in person, and we got people here hanging out, checking out Nittany Cards Plus, or over on you're here on the YouTube channel, or you're listening later on the podcast, you can subscribe to Blue White Illustrated, and you would have gotten this information as we got it over on the site. $2 or 1 month for $2. I get that wrong every time. Every single time, the dyslexia just gets to me. Code PSU1. If you see it on the screen, you know what I'm talking about if you're here on the YouTube channel. 2 months for $1. Promo code PSU1. Want to thank Nittany Cards Plus for having us here. If you have not checked them out yet, Nittany Cards Plus is the only card shop in Happy Valley in State College, located at 1631 South Atherton Street next to the PNC Bank, across from the CVS. So you know exactly where, if you've been anywhere past downtown. First off, I encourage you to explore State College when you're here for a game. There's a lot of fun places to go. Nittany Cards Plus is one of them. So they have graded slabs, sealed hobby boxes, and a licensed brand such as Topps, Bowman, Panini, Upper Deck. You can check all those out. I think JD, are you getting us some cards to? Yeah. All right, JD's going to get us some cards I can show you here on the screen. And later
Nick
today.
Singleton. Are they Nick Singleton? Can I have them?
Can you be my Vanna White here and put those up for me? Also, coming up later today, we have an awesome opportunity for fans, although I have to say it's sold out. Trace McSorley is going to be here from 5 to 6:30 to sign autographs and to meet and greet with fans. I will be back here. My wife bought a ticket, so we're coming back later tonight to see Trace and say hi. So that's all coming up at Nittany Cards Plus. You should definitely check them out. Thanks to them for being an awesome host for us today. Also, today's show is brought to you by Brandon Short, Steve Wagman, and Carl Nassib, who are running as a Penn State Alumni Trustee in the Penn State Alumni Trustee election. Their key issues: making Penn State more affordable, improving Penn State's school ranking, and honoring the past and supporting future of athletics. Brandon, Steve, and Carl are aligned in their vision and are the best candidates to lead Penn State into the future. Voting is from April 10th to May 2nd, so it's already open. You can go to PennStateVotes.com and vote for Brandon Short, Steve Wagman, and Carl Nassib. You can find the link to that, PennStateVotes.com, in the notes of this video on YouTube and, of course, on the podcast as well. So thank you to them for being a sponsor of today's show. Guys, we're going to take a quick moment to preview something we have over coming up on Monday, both on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I sat down yesterday. I was on air after we were done, Fitz. I was on air from 10 until 1:45, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just recording all kinds of videos for this weekend and for Monday. One of those with Landon Tangwall, we're taking a look at Chop Robinson and his film. So check that out. We're going to have more of this coming up later this week from Blue White Illustrated.
Oh, you went there with this game. You went there.
I know. It's a sore subject for some people, but I mean, it's some good tape on the defense, especially early on, but it's a hard one to watch. Trust me, to watch the full game, it doesn't feel good again, especially watching the all 22. It really doesn't feel good.
So this is okay. I have some weaknesses in my personal feeling for certain positions and certain things. Growing up, I wanted to be a wide receiver. So like you've seen me in person, that was not going to happen just with my size and my build. But I love speed rushers. And you talked about bending the edge with Chop a lot. So when I see a guy that can bend the edge, I'm like, say no more. Here I am. I guess show us some of the things that he does that maybe other defensive ends can't do. I know we've talked about it already, but there's that particular phrase, bending the edge. You hear that with every elite defensive end in the NFL or in college. And I guess when you're talking about him as a late first-round pick and you hear something as critical as that, can you kind of bridge the gap in terms of like what he does and where he is in that journey?
Yeah, so Chop is just his natural ability, his athletic ability is amazing. That get off is not coachable. That's just he grew up with that. He's had that since high school, and his ability to stay low to the ground and kind of that body position that he puts himself in that we were talking about earlier. That's all really uncoachable stuff. You can try to get a guy to do that type of stuff, but it's so natural to him. That's why he's such an elite edge rusher. But sorry, you can go back a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Just to the start.
Okay.
One thing that I don't get to a lot from a lot of these tackles is they were not deep setting Chop at all. And the one thing about offensive tackles particularly is they always say set to your spot. So that means get to your spot between you and the quarterback and the defensive end. Like pick that spot that you need to get to where you can make contact and settle and you're in a good position. So this offensive tackle, clearly, obviously Chop got a great jump here, but he needs to be getting a lot more vertical to be able to cut this off, the angle that Chop's taking. And this is kind of why I say, if you see how Chop's facing him too, it looks very threatening, but Chop does a great job of like keeping his shoulder pads and helmet towards the quarterback on that 45 degree, but he goes vertical still. Like we talked about him creating that width in that rush.
Interesting.
You see that, how he's rushing straight up, but his body is facing. It's very deceitful to an offensive lineman because it looks like he's coming right at you. So you're getting ready and you're kind of tempoing down that set a little bit. But in reality, Chop is still going straight up the field. It's just kind of it's a little bit of illusion. And the next thing you know,
independent, his shoulders and hips are working independently in this situation.
Absolutely.
Wow. And that causes an offensive lineman to not go. You mentioned his speed, the tackle, his speed. He's misjudging the rush because he thinks he needs to be closer to the line of scrimmage when really he needs to be retreating to get to the angle because his speed and Chop's speed are not the same, right?
Exactly. And Chop is just so fluid too with all of this. Like I said, it looks like he's about to tempo down and maybe make a move, but now he's getting ready. Like I said, he's getting ready for that contact right there. And Chop is just so quick up the field too. And there's the double hand swipe again.
Yeah.
So, anytime you get even with an offensive tackle in a situation like that, Chop is going to hit you with the double hand swipe every time. So, that's kind of the last resort for an offensive lineman is that final push, like in this position. And you see that a lot where guys kind of ride the defensive end past the quarterback.
Yeah.
And then these are those scenarios where they don't get the punch off and don't get to ride them, and Chop gets his hands off of him. A little bit better of a finish, but I'll be critical of him. It's all right.
This particular game. Okay, we got a couple more here.
I put this clip in. These I watched them when I put this together. The cut up. I rewatched these clips back to back, and I was like, "Hold on, did I just put the same clip in twice?" And I was like, "No, okay, it was the same. It was a different clip. They look so similar." And once again, go ahead.
I'm glad you brought these here, and I'm glad we're showing in all 22 or in the end zone view what happened in this game, because a lot of fans, this is not a sack, but this is an elite move by Chop Robinson, or this is just an elite pressure. And so one of the narratives about Chop is he doesn't get enough sacks. Well, tell me what else he's supposed to do on this play, Landon.
I know, and I think, if you look at a guy like Jason Owe, went in the first round with pretty much no sack production. They knew how raw and how talented he was. And he's been really good for the Ravens. So I think that's one of the reasons why Chop could sneak into the first, because of this ability. And that's game breaking as much as, they still completed it, unfortunately, and got a 15-yard gain. That's when your DN wins that good. And that's the result of the play. That kind of hurts. That also tells you what kind of game you're in for. And I think that's what we saw after play after play with this game. It was a rough one.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the preview of Landon and I talking. Guys, you won't believe Landon and I both had the same comp for Chop Robinson, NFL comp for Chop Robinson. Can either of you guess who it was?
Oh, man. On the spot.
On the spot. Sorry, I'm Nate. Do you
in the NFL?
Yes, in the NFL.
Reggie White.
I'm so glad I went to you first. That's perfect. No, it was not Reggie White. So I'll give you a hint. He plays for the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, why would I watch him then?
He used to play for the Denver Broncos.
Von Miller.
Yeah.
Von Miller was the Micah comparison coming out. I think.
Really?
I mean, you just kind of recycle these things, right? So,
well, we'll explain why in the video. And I was relieved that I'm not crazy. Like Von Miller, whenever you use a Hall of Famer comparison, everyone looks at you like, oh yeah, you're dumb. But Landon played football, so I'm not crazy.
But the funny thing with Chop is, like, you talk about his get off and his pass rush, and like, he's so twitchy. That's amazing. But, like, the difference that he makes for that entire defensive line, playing the run, doing, like, all the little things that you don't think of like a stand-in pass rusher would do, like a situational pass rusher would do. He's awesome. Like, I don't know what else to say. Landon's probably better at articulating that than he's awesome.
We do get into all of those things and why certain analysts want to say that Chop is raw. And spoiler alert, it's because he's so athletic that he didn't have to do certain things on film. So we'll get into all of that on Monday. Guys, I'm excited. We're now getting into it. After our breaking news to start the show, we are now going to be talking about the Blue-White game, which is why we're here. It's why you're coming to the Blue-White game tomorrow, or you're in town and you're watching on your phone driving in, enjoying the lovely State College weather, which is...
Don't do
maybe
that.
in the passenger seat.
Put the phone down.
Well, everyone's got a giant iPad on their car now. I'm just assuming you can cast something onto your iPad screen.
Nate and I do not. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't either. But like, I've seen some of those like concept cars where the whole dashboard's an LED screen, and I'm like, I would crash that thing for sure. But I wrote about this earlier this month. I don't know. At this point, I don't even remember. 5 players I'm interested in watching in the Blue-White game, and I wanted you guys to do the same thing.
Yep.
Also, we get to play my favorite game, which is the top 5 game.
Number 5.
Okay, so we're going to be counting down the top 5 players that these guys are interested in seeing during the Blue-White game, and then we're going to be talking about different storylines that are coming up in the game as well. So, Nate, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah.
Who is your number 5 player you're looking for?
Zaki Wheatley.
Ooh, tell me why.
Zaki?
Zaki.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always said it was Zaki, but I don't know. I talked to his dad one time, and I still don't know.
There's different pronunciations out there. Why? Because if you watched the highlight reel that Penn State released this morning,
Or read any of our coverage this spring.
either
first.
one, like you could have seen that today or known about it 3 months ago. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. He's been great. He's really right. I mean, everything's being framed in terms of the light coming on and it's not about his natural talent. That has always been there. It's about your commitment, dedication, right, seriousness of all the other stuff, right, all the other things that go into being successful at this level. He has done those things. He's just in it. And so, do I want to see that on Saturday? Yeah, for sure. See what that looks like.
Yeah. What do you think is the key in his opportunity this year in the defense with Tom Allen?
That is the key right there. Is like, how do you keep a third safety, first off, on the roster in the portal age, but also engaged? Like, you play 3 safeties and you play it effectively, and he's done that. And as Nate mentioned, we talked to some people this offseason, and you look at what he did in 2023 and I don't want to say took a step back, but he got beat on some plays.
Yeah.
He got his playing time diminished, and by the end of the season, it was basically all Jalen Reed and KJ Winston.
Yeah.
Those guys are back. So what are you thinking going in the offseason? It's either, okay, maybe this isn't the spot for me, or I can really figure this out and be a huge asset to this defense. He picked the latter, which is good. A lot to work for, a lot of potential turnovers in this defense. Like, you look at how they plan to play these safeties, and you're gonna see Jalen Reed all over the field. You're gonna see KJ Winston pretty much all over the field, I think.
Yeah.
But also, you've got that deep center fielder, as he's been, the guy that has magnetically attached to the football, as they've said throughout the last several years. have an opportunity to sort of clean up. And I think he's
Yeah.
going to have that. I think he's going to have a chance to do that. Nate mentioned the video that they put out on practice today, or from spring practice today. He was all over the place, and that's a good sign. Not going to see much of KJ Winston, if at all, this weekend, hand in a cast. So yeah, I'm excited to see Zaki as well.
It's an interesting situation with a guy who flashed early, as you guys mentioned, but the ball skills that he has and his ability to get the football is a game-changing thing for a defense. He might not even be the top safety on the team, but he could also be the most impactful guy on the team. It's a fascinating situation. Who's your number 5?
Yeah, and by the way, he would not surprise me if he led the team in interceptions as a third safety.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the situation that he's going to be put in. So my number 5, Jameel Lyons. I think Penn State's defensive line is going to have a good day on Saturday. It's a spring scrimmage. They usually do. Deny did it last year, but Lyons is a guy that really can. I mean, he's twitchy. He's huge. Like, if you walk by him, he's built differently than those other guys. And you look at Penn State's defensive line, or the defensive end position, you've got guys that you think can rush the passer, but this guy is the twitched up one that's going to do it. You look at Deny Dennis Sutton, you don't see that guy. Amazing. He's going to be a great player. Amin Vanover, great player. Like, those guys can be great players. They're just going to do it in a different way than Jameel Lyons. And if you're, let's be honest, if you're in an inter-squad scrimmage, if you have that twitchy pass rush ability to get off the ball, go around young offensive tackles, you rack up a couple of sacks and feel pretty good about your day.
Yeah, and let's take a quick break before number 4 to kind of explain for people who maybe are checking in for the first time, who are joining us because Blue-White game is tomorrow and you want to know more about what's going to happen. This particular season, James Franklin, Nate, talked about this, of he's going to make the game as competitive as possible. So when we're talking later about this particular setup, it's not the white squad versus the blue squad. The way I've been thinking about it is this is offense versus defense, because if starters or starter-like players are split between two teams, we're not going to be like, okay, we know Drew Aller's going to be on the blue team and Bo Prevula's going to be on the white team. We can assume that, and I do assume that, but we don't know specifically the balance of the teams.
Yeah.
So how are you viewing the game kind of in those contexts?
He also said on his weekly radio show, the word he used was vanilla.
After saying he was not worried about showing anything a month ago.
Lies.
Look outside. It's going to be not great tomorrow. Windy, including that.
Yeah. No, it's like a combination, right? Because the weather's not great. James clearly was not being honest about caring what other people perceive and think of. Not whether or not they think they're going to be good, but whether or not Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, and others can pick up nuggets from watching their spring game, right?
Yeah.
He said very specifically, you have somebody, are they going to look like Indiana? Are they going to look like Kansas? And are they going to look like Vanderbilt special teams? And so they are doing their best to not give those things away. So yeah, I'm expecting a little bit of predictability, but at the same time, that doesn't negate the opportunity for players to make plays, right? Like, end of the day, that's kind of what I'm looking for is, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of schemed up stuff.
Yeah.
But you could see runs, catch it, right? Throws. I mean, you still
They
have
have
the
to
opportunity
practice something. They have to practice some basic concept that they are going to run at some point in the season.
Totally.
Whether or not it's the full thing or it's parts of the thing is I think where the nuance in that comes. Drew K, he is here in the chat. He says, first live show, longtime listener. Love to have you here, Drew K. Awesome. He says his top 5, the entire wide receiver room, Kavion Keys, Tony Rojas, transfer corners, Quentin Martin, and Ethan Grunkmeyer. Those are his 5.
His 18 guys to watch.
His 18 guys to watch.
Andrew K. Kotelnicki.
Are you Mr. Fantastic? Because that was a stretch.
Number 4.
It was a line. That's correct. All right, so we're going to do the snake draft style. Fitz, coming back to you to 4. Who are you looking for? Who's your number 4 player?
I'm going to go with Drew, and A.J. Harris, one of the transfer corners, brings a different brand of Big Ten cornerness to that room. It's he's a big physical kid. He's been lauded for his play this spring. I'm excited to see what he can do. I don't know that the corners are going to have to do a ton. And I also don't know that you can take a ton away from, number one, the game in general, but also like how much these corners play. So from 1 to 6, they seem pretty good. They got a couple of good freshmen there as well. But A.J. Harris has been the buzzier of the guys this spring.
Nate, are you surprised by that? Because Fitz, we had a conversation in January of like, what do you expect from a guy who's a redshirt freshman transferring all the way from Georgia to Penn State? And here we are talking about him the way we are. Are you surprised by this?
No,
No?
not
Okay.
Not now. I don't know. Look, I don't. You know me, right? Like, let me know what people think of them once they are here. That is how my perceptions are formed. So, like, do I have expectations because he was a high four star,
5-star, yeah.
5-star kid that went to Georgia? No, not really. That's not. You're asking the wrong guy because I don't operate that way.
Yeah. So, well, not every pass can be a completion. So I'll dip back over here. Fitz, are you surprised that he's here on your list?
A little bit, because you look at what Penn State had coming back. They had Cam Miller and Zion Tracy, who you kind of penciled in as starters, and then Jalen Kimber comes along. Elliot Washington still. Like, there's so many bodies there that creating separation, especially as I keep saying in this portal era, creating separation is going to be tough. But I think A.J. Harris has done a really nice job in establishing himself as a guy that the move wasn't too big. Like, there's situations where guys have to come in, get comfortable, figure out their role in the situation. And it seems like pretty quickly we heard some really good things about A.J. Harris.
Go ahead. Just one thing. Again, from Franklin's radio show, which happens to be a gold mine. He mentioned that
Nobody knew about.
Yes. he mentioned that he didn't know if the top end would meet in the corners room would meet last year's top end, but that the breadth of talent that they have is as good as they have ever had. So, right. So the bottom to the top is cumulatively very, 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 very good in that cornerback room.
And if you think about it, replacing 3 NFL guys in 1 year, I don't want to say it's impossible. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's hard to get a guy, even if you have Daquan Hardy's skill, to play like Daquan Hardy out of the box when you haven't done it yet, even if eventually maybe you can. We have Ryan here in the chat. He says, why are we not talking about Lambert Smith? And thank you, people in the chat who've been here since the beginning of the show. We mentioned that. We talked about that in the first 10 minutes of the show. So if you are watching this live, I think can you rewind on a live thing on YouTube?
Sure.
I think so. So if you want to have that conversation, you can rewind that, or you can wait for another 20-ish minutes until we're done with the show, and then you can watch it on replay. We'll also have that for you as an exclusive video later tonight. So that's all coming up on the show. Who are we here with? Nate, your number 4.
My number 4 is like that. Abdul Carter.
All right. I know why, but tell me why.
I think that through the course of the spring, and really the winter, we've had these conversations about like, how does that position change happen, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this guy who is immensely talented. We know that. Nobody is arguing against that. But the level of presumption that it would work, felt a little bit stretchy, right? Right, and so is
presumed, like globally, I think.
Oh, he's going to be awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just going to continue to be awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that James Franklin brought that up in his spring press conference at the beginning of the spring.
I brought that up in February.
You brought it up in February. I brought it up last September when I knew that. Kidding, but no, you just have to wonder how he's going to adapt to it and acclimate to that position, because it is admittedly hard. It is a different spot. There are different skills required of doing that. And so, by the end of spring practice, though, James Franklin's talking about how well he's done, and that it has been faster than he anticipated. So we might get an opportunity to see a nugget of that on Saturday. I would, if Abdul plays, right?
Yeah.
Like 4 snaps.
Right? Well, Fitz, do you think? I think he still, even if it's going well, you still want to see a little bit more.
He needs live reps.
Yeah, he needs some live reps.
It's just kind of like how much risk versus reward, basically, is what I would say.
I mean, if he kills it on the first series and you see what you need to see, like, sure, but if you want to see him a little bit more, I think that's open there. Ram, he's here. He says he's looking out for it. I'm going to do this backwards so that I get it right and give him the number 1 reveal. Freshman class, Luke, Ethan,
Reynolds.
Quentin, and then, of course, number 4 is Cooper Cousins on his own. Number 3 is the cornerback room. Number 2, Julian Filming and Trey Wallace. And number 1, Drew Aller Dime, says Rom. He also says he watches the show every day. Appreciate everyone and their support. We got people here who are fans of the show, who are here live at Nittany Cards Plus. I asked people to come out, and they delivered. So thank you to everybody here who's hanging out with us watching the show. So let's get to number 3, because I know everyone's waiting with bated breath to hear what you guys are looking for so that they can be very smart tomorrow during their tailgate. Here's number 3.
Number 3.
We were just trying to confer who's number 3, and yes, Nate, it is you are number 3.
Great. 3, I got Kaden Saunders.
All right.
And
Feels pretty important today.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Look, he's a guy who I think showed, again, had some flashing, right, last season, and in a lot of ways made Penn State fans salivate for him because, 1, he didn't get that much run, and 2, things weren't any better for the starters, right? So it's always the allure of the unknown, but Kaden was in there. And look, 3rd year, right? It is, I don't want to say put up or shut up time, but like, hey, this is where the expectations come in of, all right, you've had 2 seasons to marinate. Where are you at? Where are you in that process? Can Andy Kotelnicki get him open or aid in that process? And then what does he do with the ball when he has it in his hands? Because I do think that is a big part of the perception of this receivers group as a whole, is that can they catch the ball? Yes. Probably.
Yeah.
Can they do something with it after they've caught the ball? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the big question that I think people have some hopes that a guy like Kaden can answer.
Fitz, what do you think?
There needs to be some sort of detachment for Penn State fans and Kaden Saunders with what he was as a recruit in terms of where he was rated. I think you look at what he's done so far, and it does not match. We've got everywhere in the top 100 except for on 3, which had him at 226 overall. He looked like a big-time threat.
Yeah.
Quick, just in and out of his routes. Caught the ball really well. You look at him, and a lot of that insight has been as a punt returner, and he just hasn't shown the same shiftiness. He hasn't shown that as he's had to add weight, as he's had to get bigger to adjust to the Big Ten game. But still, people are clutching onto the top 100 rankings and saying, "Oh, this kid." This could be the guy. Well, I think there needs to be some sort of detachment from that because he hasn't been that guy, and I don't think we've seen, even if he hits his ceiling, that he's going to be a top 100 draft pick or something like that. So
yeah, I mean, the idea was he was KJ Hamler, and we found out he's not KJ Hamler, but he can still be good. Like, if there's one player that I've seen consistently either get praise or do things that turn my head in spring practice, it's been KJ. It's been Kaden.
Yes.
And I think that that's important, even if we didn't have the conversation about KeAndre today and some of the news that's come out about that. He was going to be important to this offense because there is a role for a slot receiver to get down the field and to get the football, and I think he can do some of those things in this particular offense. We talked about it on the show earlier this week. They had that at Kansas, so I think that's a really important part of this particular window that Penn State has right now.
And folks, want the explosive guy. You want the guy that's going to make the big plays, and we thought coming out that he had that potential. And it's okay to be the consistent guy. It's okay to be more of a possession guy that, can eventually, break one down the seam or something like that. So I think that that's the important thing here is like he can still be productive, absolutely. But it's just, leave those stars behind because once they get on campus, it's a whole different game.
Yeah. Who do you got next?
That's a great question, as I have Kaden Saunders' profile open right now.
What was that Kaden Saunders number ranking from on 3?
226 overall. Anyway, I mean, I saw him at Under Armour when he was a senior, and he got hurt, unfortunately. But he was in and out of breaks as well as anybody down there. It's just it's been really interesting to see the difference as he has continued to have to add mass and things like that in his quickness, his shuttle type, his short area quickness and things like that.
And I don't want to belabor the point too much, but this is what you have when you guys have upside, and there are projections where some guys don't develop the way that we all predict. We think that seeing a guy who runs like, I mean, Kaden was great on film to watch. He was super fun just to watch play football. But there's the projection if he was like 160 pounds. And what is he when he's 175, 180? We assume certain things, but that doesn't mean that's what happens. Okay.
Speaking of really good recruiting rankings, number 3 for me, Cooper Cousins on 3 5-star. And he's good. Like, just from talking to so many people in the program, every time you bring him up, people's eyes light up because they think that he can be special. Whether he's special as a center right away or whether he's at guard, as we saw at practice on Tuesday, still remains a question, but I think you're going to see him on the field regardless. And excited to see what he's going to do. He's not necessarily going to come out and dominate as a true freshman. You shouldn't expect that, basically.
Yeah.
But he's got the opportunity to. Why are you looking at me like that? He's got the opportunity to be a really good player at Penn State and be a 3-and-out type guy.
I want to build on what you're saying.
You just don't see his faces all the time in the try box that we've got going on. He's always got something on his mind that he wants to say.
You can just tell me to shut up. That's what you want.
That's usually what I do.
Yeah.
Not on camera.
I think that there is something very interesting going on with the cross training of him. Right. You know that. They developed their interior offensive linemen at the guard spots and center, right? So that's important. But James Franklin said at the beginning of spring practice that they really, really try hard to narrow the focus when guys first get on campus to one position. To me, the fact that he was at right guard on Tuesday night and appears to be getting reps there through the backside of practice is an indication of how far along he is at center. Right? It is a reinforcement, right? Because we can talk about it like, he's great and people are buzzing about him hard. That's fine. But there's an action beside it that says, okay, not only is he going to compete with Nick Dawkins for the center starting job, but he could bump somebody at guard, right? There is a potential there for him to be good enough if he gets those reps, and it sets him up with a foundation for the summer to say, hey, not only can you compete here in preseason practice at center, but you can possibly compete at guard.
Yeah, go for it.
And it seems like he's passed the first test. We've talked about the Berkmeyer comparison last year, where Berkmeyer was hot coming in the spring and then kind of fizzled. That hasn't happened with Cooper Cousins. That's certainly a good sign. In terms of praise for a true freshman, I'm having a tough time placing many in the last 5 or 6 years that have been as buzzy as Cooper Cousins.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think you mentioned, right guard specifically, Sal Wormley, 6th-year guy. Landon, when I've talked to him a couple times here on the show, has mentioned, you're a 6th-year guy, you don't need to play every single rep. You don't need to be out there all of September. So it tells you who they have an eye on putting in the game.
Yep.
At that right guard spot, if they want to get some of those reps off of Sal Wormley.
Yep.
And it's not some of the guys that came in the year before. It's the freshmen, and I think that's obviously telling. What is telling is we need to move on to number 2.
Number 2.
Just like transitions, not every question or transition is going to be a total completion for a touchdown. We're just going to go with Fitz because I don't remember where we are. Who's your number 2?
We'll keep getting 1% better here.
Yes.
Number 2, Anthony Dunca, offensive tackle, is competing with Nolan Rucci on the right side. Of course, you cross-train. You do a lot of things to try and get reps for everybody. He's played guard. He's playing tackle. I think that he is a very talented guy. And going back to Cousins, going to Dunca, these guys are going to have missteps. There's going to be situations where they get run past or run over or something like that. They are young offensive linemen. That comes with the territory. However, there's progress in that. There's progress in everything that we're going to see. Like I said, defensive line is going to feast tomorrow, in my opinion. But at the same time, you learn from that, you get better from that, and it's not indicative of what you're going to end up seeing in the fall, especially with Mr. Donka, who I think is really talented.
I love that you have him up here at number 2 because I think there's a presumption of what he is. We saw him for one game. More information, please. I love it. Right. What do you think?
About Donka?
Yeah. What do you think about the situation there?
Yeah, I think again, as a cross-trained kind of guy who has spent some time at guard, that is an important caveat as well, but they need him, I think, pretty obviously more at tackle, given that you lost some pretty big pieces there.
Yeah.
And Drew Shelton's been out all spring, right? That is impactful. So yeah, JB Nelson not in the last couple of practices that we saw.
Yeah.
We see, very little of practice, and we talked about this before, but we haven't seen them throw dunk on the left side, which is interesting to me in a sense that, hey, they must feel pretty good about Shelton, like in the long term here, and they certainly need to secure that right side. And you've got him, you've got Nolan Rucci over there, so very curious to see how that battle continues to play out. It's one of the better battles in terms of feedback that we've heard so far this spring.
Do you think we do see either of them on the left in this game?
Might have to.
Might have to. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, like there's for as good as we've talked about, as good as you feel about the tackles they have from a talent perspective, there is a little bit of like, well, you are missing half of them.
There ain't many of them, yeah, because you've got Javen Williams over there. Of course, you've got some guys that are banged up. Egan Boyer is a talented guy, but he's a couple years away from playing. He's just going to be very interesting. Those defensive ends are sharpening their knives as we speak.
Who's your number 2?
And I messed this up. I should have just put them together, but
That's all right.
I've got Bo, right? And I'm not here to stir the pot, but I'm going to anyway.
That is your role on this show.
He's been buzzy, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of buzz this spring for old Bo. We understand certainly what the fan sentiment was last year down the stretch, especially given how Drew played in those 2 games, right? The 2 in-season games against Ohio State and Michigan were not Drew's finest hour. And when you have a backup who has shown in certain instances that he can do some things, that again leads to some a little bit of tantalization, right? For what the possibilities are there. And so now compound that already existing storyline with 1, a little buzz, 2, Bo himself talking about his fit in the offense.
Yes.
It changes things, right? It gives him an opportunity to play within what Andy Kotelnicki does, how he might be able to, provide regardless of what happens with Drew, right? Regardless of Drew being the obvious starter going into the season and preseason camp, you still think that maybe Bo can bring something to the table, that he can provide something to Penn State's offense, and it'll be interesting to see how he does with that tomorrow in 30-mile-an-hour winds.
Better.
That's why I picked offensive linemen.
The one thing that everybody wants to see is the quarterbacks throw the ball, and they're going to have 42 runs tomorrow.
Yeah.
And 3 passes. So
Holsworth season.
Yeah, that's right. I'm all in.
I'm glad that you brought it up because I feel like, and this is where we need you, because I sometimes feel like when I say something nice about Bo Pula and we talk about how well he fits in this offense, like it comes off to certain people as fuel for their he's QB1 or as a slight to Drew. Yeah. Like you can't say something nice without it just being something nice. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think that that's a very important thing. Fitz, do we get to see full Bo Pula though? Because he can't get hit.
No, absolutely not. Yep. I mean, if you do, you're putting your quarterbacks who they've already gotten one quarterback injury this spring. Putting those guys at risk is not what you need to do on the second Saturday in April.
Yeah.
But it would be cool.
It would be cool.
But it would be neat.
It'd be a lot of fun
to see that.
You might actually see some of those explosive plays that we've been hearing so much about.
I wrote about it yesterday.
Yeah.
Right? That just for me.
And that's why we're here.
For me, just so that I don't have to go from April until August 31st having to talk about this mystery of whether or not they have explosive plays. Andy Kotelnicki was brought to Penn State to deliver explosive plays. They didn't get explosive plays in the transfer portal, period.
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't get that.
Got to coach it.
You got to coach it. You got to get Nick there, right? I don't know that Katron is an explosive play guy, right? He's a chunk play guy. He'll get you 20, but how many guys do you have on this roster? What's your personnel that can go 80?
Yeah, he can make 3 guys miss and get 60, but Nick can make
Always
1
comes back
miss
to
and
Nick.
get 100.
Always comes back to Nick.
I'm telling you, he changes things.
I know.
He changes things, and you saw that in 2022. So he needs somebody with him though in that receivers room, and maybe it's Trey, maybe it's Kate. I don't know who it is, but it's got to exist. It has to exist between Drew and those receivers for Nick to have that type of success.
This is a perfect transition.
Number 1.
You have a perfect list. It's a snake draft. We're going back to you. Your number 1,
Drew
Aller.
Drew.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about his, given the weather and all those things, given the offense and how he is best suited. What are you looking for from him tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a stupid pick by me because he's not going to do anything tomorrow. It's going to be handoff city because of the weather, but I would like to see it. I think, again, we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, or I tried to have this conversation. We didn't actually have it, but a couple of things. He should have thrown more interceptions last year. That would have helped him.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he tried to throw interceptions, but there were games where the outcome was not at risk. And I'm not saying that this is something that is coached into you or not, but loosening up, right? I mean that's kind of the concept that we've been talking about with him all of last season, and certainly this spring. Your conversation with him is about feeling good and playing loose and not being so tight, right? That is part of the equation with him. So to be able to see him this spring, this summer, going into the season, being that guy, I think is a major question. Right? I think it is a big part of this team's opportunity and story for next season.
It's very funny to read the mentions after retweeting that video. Too many interceptions in that video.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Pick a side, guys. Pick a side.
If you want it both ways, like I had this argument on our YouTube channel in the comments. If you want it both ways, like you want no games to matter, but every game to matter. You can only not lose games. And so like you can only not throw interceptions and bombs.
We've gone deeper than intended here. So
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's something I was thinking about this week.
Yeah, we can tell.
We got a couple things in the chat before we get to our number 1 from Fitz, and we get to the end of our list. Got a couple things here in the chat. Always appreciate everyone donating and supporting the channel. Thank you to A. Campbell. He says lots of positives. AJ Harris, Julian Fleming, negatives, Manny Diaz, and KeAndre Lambert-Smith. We'll see again. We're not putting that as an ultimate. It is happening with KeAndre Lambert-Smith. Check out the first part of the video.
But probably.
But probably. But that's the journalist responsibility thing to do. Yep. Has your outlook for 2024 gone up or down since the bowl game? This is an interesting question. Fitz, what do you think?
It really hasn't changed for me. You can take a certain amount away from spring, but at the same time, the optimism is just that on the offensive side of the ball. Like we all want to see explosive plays because we want to watch fun football, basically. Yep. And there were times last year where it was just not fun. So I haven't changed, but you just want to see proof of concept, I guess. You've seen Kansas film, you've seen Buffalo film, where it's fun to watch his offense, Andy Kotelnicki's offense, in action. You want to see that at Penn State. I mean, and until you get to fall camp, I don't know that there's much that you can change about that. Tom Allen's a great coach. Manny Diaz was a great coach. I feel solid about the defense.
Doesn't matter.
Nobody cares that we're going to talk about the defense because they just feel taking it for granted is what we do. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I haven't changed much in terms of my outlook on the season. I just want to continue to hear more.
Yeah, I'll give you the fire.
All right.
Has my outlook changed on 2024 from August 2023? Yes.
Why?
Negatively.
Yeah, why? I'm sorry. I knew by the look in your face you were going to say negatively, but why?
Right.
What's your reasoning?
A variety of things. I think that we had thoughts about what everyone would be going into 2023 that in some cases panned out and in other cases didn't. Right. Mm-hmm. And so now you're throwing in the introduction of, I mean, I literally just heard Carl Nassib talking about it the other day, about how he spent his entire career not having a defensive coordinator 2 years in a row and how impactful that was on his career. I think it is naive to treat this as though Andy Kotelnicki's going to come in and they're going to fly. I do. I think that is a naive way to look at it. I think there's going to be growing pains. Yes, you want to speed up that process as much as you possibly can. Yeah. But is Drew the guy that we thought he could be today, that in August 2023. I'm not sure. Right?
Yeah.
Singleton was not at the level.
Right. He didn't overcome situationally to still be great, which
it
some
was
guys can do.
And it was a harder situation.
Yep.
The receivers room isn't better. It's not demonstrably better. You're not able. I can't pick out and say, hey, this is a deficiency from last year that is obviously improved. Right? Incrementally, maybe. Sure. I'll definitely give them that. I think that the development side of the program has always been a strength under James Franklin, and I think that will continue to be so. But sometimes you need a dude. Sometimes you need a dude.
Amen.
And I don't know that they have a dude. And to be honest, again, KeAndre was the hope for the dude. Right? Like KeAndre was that guy that they needed to become that. Now, granted, Trey could be that.
Yeah.
And that's a possibility as well. And
Yep.
so certainly there's still an opportunity there for him to take those strides. But I see a formula ultimately that mirrors a lot of what you saw last year.
Yeah.
And we know how that turned out.
Especially because
Give up.
the wrinkle. Okay, we still have 3 months of shows in the off season. Like we still have to. This doesn't go away. The big thing with Andy Kotelnicki and what he's able to do is not just about the quarterback running, but it's integral. And how does that work with Drew Aller? The first practice, guys. When I said, like, I don't know how they're going to make this work. Certain things don't make sense in this offense with Drew Aller under center. Right. And then we saw him doing speed options the very first drill during the very first practice in spring camp. So it matters.
Drew doing speed options.
Drew.
Correct.
Leading them in speed options, which means, and for those that don't understand, a speed option is where the quarterback has the option to keep the ball and run or pitch it to a player that is out in the flat in front of them. A Nick Singleton. It's a way to get these guys in space and be explosive, put the offense or the defense in position to not be right. But if they just always force Drew to keep the football, that's a great way to make the offense not right in those situations, unless Drew is more of a runner. And we all think he's a good athlete. We just don't think he's Bo Prabula or Jason Bean, the quarterback from Kansas. Like, there are different levels to this. So how does all of that work out? If Drew can make it work, and I think Andy Kotelnicki's smart enough to lean into Drew's strengths. Right. But it has to be a part of it. Like, it has to be a part of the offense. So I'm not as negative as Nate. But I have some questions. I still have some concerns.
We've all got questions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's April.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
We all have one question left. And it is, who's your number one player you're looking for?
Oh, I forgot we were doing that. Boy, mine's not nearly as exciting as that last segment that we did. Mine's on the wide receivers, which, of course, Nate's so nicely pointed out.
Repent.
Yes.
Honestly, I just wanted to play my graphics,
okay,
so
well,
that's
we
what
go.
we're doing this for.
Very windy on Saturday, so I'm not sure how we're going to see. Nate mentioned Kaden Saunders a little bit ago. Liam Clifford, I think, is a guy that we can look to as, taking a bigger role, like being the guy that I talked about with Kaden Saunders, being the consistent guy, and he's going to get that, lunch pail stereotype, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But being that guy that can do some different things at different levels of the defense. And I think he can be that. And, hey, this is a group that needs some sort of consistency. Does that come from Liam? I don't know. Does it come from Trey Wallace? I don't know. I don't know where it's going to come from. Goes back to the question about how do you feel about this team. That's a big speed bump, man. That is a big speed bump that we're not sure how we're not sure the ability to get over at this point.
It's so I agree with both of you guys, and I think that you make excellent points. Watching some of the athletes they had at Kansas and where they were able to get out of them, if it makes you more optimistic, but at the same time, Big 12 defense. I think that you have to talk about that. Right. And secondly, being consistent. Like, that's the thing we're talking about here. We're not talking about talent. We're talking about consistency. And a guy who has B+ athleticism, but A+ consistency is somebody who performs. Right. And they need to get to A+ consistency, and then they're going to be great. Wherever they can get on that scale, I think is really, really the story.
Talent does not equal productivity.
Yep.
Can I just add that I think the conversation from the players that are living it, and so now naturally players are going to be nice to each other and say nice things about each other. But that's been consistent throughout the spring, is that Andy Kotelnicki, Drew Allard, Bo Prabula, you name it, the guys that are involved with the receivers are all saying nice things about the receivers, right? saying that they have taken strides, that they do have a collective chip on their shoulder, that there are things that they have gotten better at. And so if that step is enough, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is some reason to believe that it's going to be better. Right?
Are we talking about what we talked about on the show the other day about complementing leadership versus complementing playing ability?
I think there's it feels like there's a second component to this of saying those receivers were more than good enough to win 10 games last year.
Yeah.
Right? And really 10 games that weren't all that close. Is it good enough to be
Such a gulf there. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you have more than 2 games on the schedule this year, right? Of which are going to be top 25 games.
Yeah.
But not top 3 games, right?
Right. There's a bigger delta of competitive games this year. That's a great point.
I think it changes the complexion though of what good enough is in that room. Where, right? I think it still puts me on the very underside of like national championship talks. I would like if I'm looking at this team, I'm not saying national championship. I don't know who is or who would. Playoffs. Yeah, you could get there.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you that, but we're out of time on today's show. But I do want to give you the final word here. Corey Smith is in the chat. She says, super cool. So glad to be able to participate from afar. Safe travels to my son and daughter. Handle business, then have fun. Have a blast. She says, #WeAre. This is, of course, the mother of Corey Smith, the Penn State recruit who's here on the show. It is super cool to be here. Thanks again to Nittany Cards Plus for being here. You should come check this place out because it is super cool. If you love sports, you're watching this show for an hour, you probably love football. But it's not just football. It's basketball. It's NFL. It's NBA. It's MMA. Whatever kind of card or collectible you're interested in, they've got it here for you at Nittany Cards Plus. So thanks again to Jason for having us. I'd love to do more of these. I think this is super fun to get you guys, all of us in the same room and have a conversation. It feels...
Look at these.
Look at this.
Look at these.
Look at this. Are these for us? Yeah. Oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man.
Oh, what a day.
I feel like we're leaving the restaurant and we're getting the mint, except the mint is much nicer and more valuable. So that's it for us from Nittany Cards Plus. We'll be back on the air tomorrow, 1 o'clock. We have a 45-minute pregame show. Myself and Kyle Leff are going to be doing a pregame show where we're going to be talking about a lot of these similar things, but we're going to get some different conversations going about Penn State and the Blue-White game, which comes up tomorrow at 2 o'clock. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and you can follow these guys' social media everywhere else to get all of their information and breaking news as it comes out. Subscribe. What do you got? Got anything good?
John Rispoli, Jared Verse, former Albany defensive end. It's going to be a first-round pick.
Yeah. See, this could be you. Come out to Nittany Cards Plus. Talk to you later.
Dan Lanning?